Sarah Mitchell never thought a regular Tuesday evening would change her entire life. She was driving home from her job at the marketing firm, thinking about the dinner she planned to cook for her boyfriend Jake when he returned from his business trip. The rain had started falling heavily, making the road slippery and dangerous. As she turned onto Maple Street, a truck ran a red light and slammed into the side of her car. The impact was so strong that her small sedan spun twice before crashing into a streetlight. Sarah felt a sharp pain in her chest before everything went black. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics worked quickly to get her out of the twisted metal. She was unconscious and bleeding from several cuts on her face and arms. Her left leg was trapped under the dashboard, and they could see it was badly injured. The paramedics knew she needed to get to the hospital immediately. At City General Hospital, the emergency room was busy with the usual evening cases. Dr. Michael Harrison had just finished treating a patient with a broken arm when the ambulance arrived. He was 45 years old with gray hair at his temples and kind brown eyes. He had been working as an emergency doctor for over 20 years and had seen many serious accidents. When they brought Sarah in, Dr. Harrison immediately took charge. He could see she had several injuries that needed urgent attention. Her pulse was weak and she had lost a lot of blood. He called for the surgery team while he worked to stabilize her condition. "We need to stop the bleeding first," he told the nurses as they moved her to the operating room. "Get me 4 units of blood and prepare for emergency surgery." For the next 6 hours, Dr. Harrison and his team worked to save Sarah's life. She had internal bleeding, a broken leg, and several deep cuts that needed careful stitching. The doctor's steady hands moved with skill and precision as he repaired the damage to her body. During the surgery, something unusual happened. As Dr. Harrison worked on Sarah's injuries, he found himself looking at her face more than he normally would with patience. Even with the cuts and bruises, he could see she was a beautiful young woman with delicate features and long brown hair. There was something about her peaceful expression that touched him in a way he hadn't expected. When the surgery was finally over, Dr. Harrison felt relieved. Sarah was stable, but she would need several days to recover. He made sure she was comfortable in the recovery room and checked on her condition every few hours. The next morning, Sarah slowly opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was a handsome older man in a white coat sitting beside her bed, reading her medical chart. When he noticed she was awake, his face lit up with a warm smile. "Good morning, Sarah," he said gently. "I'm Dr. Harrison. How are you feeling?" Sarah tried to speak, but her throat was dry. The doctor quickly got her some water and helped her take small sips. "Where am I?" she whispered. "You're at City General Hospital," he explained. "You were in a car accident yesterday evening. You've had surgery, but you're going to be fine." As the days passed, Dr. Harrison visited Sarah more often than he needed to. He told himself it was just to make sure she was healing properly. But deep down he knew there was another reason. He enjoyed talking with her and found himself looking forward to their conversations. Sarah was grateful for the doctor's attention. She was scared and in pain, and his presence made her feel safe. She noticed how his eyes crinkled when he smiled and how gentle his voice was when he explained her treatment. Even though she was in the hospital, she began to look forward to his visits. On the 3rd day, Sarah asked about her personal belongings from the car. The nurse brought her a bag with her purse and phone. When she turned on her phone, she saw dozens of missed calls and messages from Jake. She realized he probably didn't even know about the accident. Dr. Harrison was in the room when she started crying. "What's wrong?" he asked with concern. "My boyfriend doesn't know I'm here," she said through her tears. "He's been away on business and I haven't been able to call him." The doctor felt a strange disappointment when she mentioned her boyfriend, though he tried to hide it. "Would you like me to help you call him?" he offered. Sarah shook her head. "I want to wait until I feel stronger. I don't want him to worry too much." Dr. Harrison understood, but he couldn't help feeling glad that she wasn't calling her boyfriend right away. He was enjoying these quiet moments with Sarah, and he didn't want them to end. As Sarah's condition improved, she began to notice more things about Dr. Harrison. He had a kind way of explaining medical procedures that made her feel calm. His hands were gentle when he checked her injuries, and he always made sure she was comfortable before he left her room. One evening, as he was checking her chart, Sarah asked him about his life outside the hospital. "Do you have a family, Dr. Harrison?" He paused for a moment. "I have a son," he said simply. "He's about your age, actually. Very busy with his work. What does he do?" Sarah asked. He works in sales, Dr. Harrison replied. Travels a lot for business. As the week continued, Sarah found herself thinking about Dr. Harrison even when he wasn't in the room. She told herself it was just gratitude for saving her life, but she couldn't deny that she was attracted to him. There was something about his maturity and confidence that drew her to him. Dr. Harrison was struggling with similar feelings. He knew it was inappropriate to feel attracted to a patient, especially one so much younger than him. But he couldn't help himself. Sarah was intelligent, funny, and beautiful, and he found himself making excuses to spend time in her room. Neither of them realized that this growing attraction would soon lead to a discovery that would shock them both and change their lives forever. After a week in the hospital, Sarah was feeling much better. Her broken leg was healing well, though she still needed crutches to walk. The cuts on her face had almost disappeared, leaving only faint marks that Dr. Harrison assured her would fade completely in time. Every morning, Dr. Harrison would stop by her room during his rounds. What started as quick medical checkups had turned into longer conversations about books, movies, and life in general. Sarah discovered that the doctor was well-read and had traveled to many interesting places. He told her stories about his medical training in different countries and the challenging cases he had worked on over the years. "You must have saved so many lives," Sarah said one morning as she watched him check her chart. Dr. Harrison smiled modestly. "That's what we're here for. But I have to admit some patients are more memorable than others." He looked at her with an expression that made Sarah's heart beat faster. She wondered if he meant her, but she didn't dare ask. The physical therapy sessions were difficult for Sarah. Learning to walk with crutches was frustrating, and her leg often hurt after the exercises. Dr. Harrison would sometimes stop by the therapy room to encourage her, and his presence always seemed to give her strength to try harder. "You're doing great," he would tell her. "I've seen many patients with similar injuries, and you're recovering faster than most." One afternoon, while Sarah was struggling with a particularly difficult exercise, she started to cry from frustration. Dr. Harrison happened to be passing by and saw her distress. He dismissed the physical therapist and sat down beside her. "What's really bothering you?" he asked gently. "I feel so helpless," Sarah admitted. "I've always been independent, and now I can't even walk normally. My whole life has been turned upside down." Dr. Harrison listened carefully to her words. "Recovery takes time," he said softly. "But you're stronger than you think. I've watched you these past weeks, and I can see your determination. Don't give up now." His words comforted her, and she found herself leaning slightly toward him. For a moment, they sat very close together, and Sarah could smell his cologne. She felt drawn to him in a way that confused and excited her. Dr. Harrison also felt the pull between them. He wanted to reach out and touch her hand, to comfort her in a way that went beyond his role as her doctor. Instead, he stood up quickly and cleared his throat. "I should let you get back to your therapy," he said, his voice a little unsteady. As Sarah continued her recovery, she began to spend time in the hospital garden. It was a peaceful place with flowers and benches where patients could get fresh air. She would sit there in the afternoons reading books and enjoying the sunshine. One day, Dr. Harrison found her there during his lunch break. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Of course not," Sarah replied, moving over on the bench to make room for him. They sat together quietly for a while, watching other patients and visitors walk through the garden. Sarah noticed that Dr. Harrison looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "You work too hard," she observed. "It's the nature of the job," he replied. "Emergency medicine doesn't follow regular hours. Don't you have anyone at home who worries about you working so much?" Dr. Harrison was quiet for a moment. "My wife died 5 years ago," he said softly. "Cancer. Since then, work has been my main focus." Sarah felt a wave of sympathy for him. "I'm sorry," she said. "That must have been very difficult." "It was," he admitted. "But talking to you these past weeks has reminded me that there's more to life than just work." The way he looked at her when he said this made Sarah's breath catch. She realized that her feelings for this man were becoming much stronger than gratitude. She was falling for him, and it seemed like he might be falling for her too. That evening, Sarah finally called Jake. She had been putting it off, telling herself she wanted to be stronger before she talked to him. But the real reason was that talking to Jake felt like betraying the growing feelings she had for Dr. Harrison. Sarah. Oh my God, I've been trying to reach you for days. Jake's voice was frantic when he answered the phone. I'm okay, she said quickly. I was in a car accident, but I'm fine now. What? When? Why didn't you call me sooner? Jake demanded. Sarah explained about the accident and her stay in the hospital. Jake was upset that she hadn't contacted him immediately, and they had their first real argument in months. When she finally hung up, Sarah felt emotionally drained. Dr. Harrison knocked on her door just as she was wiping tears from her eyes. Is everything all right? He asked with concern. I just talked to my boyfriend, she said. He's angry that I didn't call him sooner. Maybe he's just scared because he almost lost you, Dr. Harrison suggested, though something in his voice suggested he didn't really want to defend Jake. Maybe, Sarah agreed. He's coming back early from his trip to see me. Dr. Harrison felt his heart sink at this news. He had been hoping for more time with Sarah before she returned to her normal life. That's good, he said, trying to sound professional. Family support is important for recovery. But neither of them felt good about Jake's return. They had both been living in a bubble these past weeks where the outside world didn't exist. Soon reality would intrude, and they would have to face the fact that their growing attraction was complicated and possibly wrong. The next day, Dr. Harrison told Sarah that she would be able to go home soon. Her physical condition had improved, enough that she no longer needed to stay in the hospital. I'll miss our talks, Sarah said without thinking. So will I, Dr. Harrison admitted. They looked at each other for a long moment, both knowing that something special had developed between them, but neither willing to say it out loud. That afternoon, Sarah sat in the garden again, thinking about her situation. She was supposed to be happy about going home and seeing Jake again. Instead, she felt sad about leaving the hospital and not seeing Dr. Harrison every day. She realized that her feelings had grown beyond simple attraction. She was falling in love with the doctor who had saved her life, and the thought of not seeing him anymore made her heart ache. What she didn't know was that Dr. Harrison was having the same thoughts in his office, staring at her medical file, and wondering how he was going to let her go. Sarah was discharged from the hospital on a Thursday morning. Jake had returned from his business trip the night before and was there to pick her up. Dr. Harrison came to say goodbye professionally, shaking her hand and wishing her well with her recovery. Thank you for everything, Sarah said, her eyes lingering on his face longer than they should have. Take care of yourself, he replied, his voice carefully neutral even though his heart was racing. Jake was impatient to leave. He had taken time off work to care for Sarah and wanted to get her home quickly. As they walked toward the exit, Sarah couldn't help but look back at Dr. Harrison, who was still standing by the nurse's station watching her leave. The first few days at home were difficult for Sarah. Jake tried to be helpful, but he didn't understand why she seemed so quiet and distant. He expected her to be happy to be home and grateful for his care, but instead she seemed lost in her own thoughts. You've been different since the accident, Jake complained one evening as they sat watching television. It's like you're not really here. Sarah forced herself to smile. I'm sorry. I'm still recovering. It takes time to feel normal again. But the truth was that she didn't want to feel normal again. The weeks in the hospital with Dr. Harrison had felt more real and alive than anything she had experienced in years. Being back in her regular life felt like pretending to be someone she no longer was. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, Sarah had a follow-up appointment with Dr. Harrison. Jake offered to drive her, but she insisted on taking a taxi. She told him she didn't want to bother him at work, but really she wanted to see Dr. Harrison alone. When she walked into his office, her heart started beating fast. He looked up from his desk and smiled, and she felt the same electricity she had felt in the hospital. How are you feeling? He asked as he examined her leg. Much better, she said. The physical therapy is helping. That's good to hear. He finished the examination and sat back in his chair. Your recovery is excellent. You shouldn't need any more follow-up appointments. Sarah felt panic at the thought of not having a reason to see him again. What if something goes wrong? She asked. You can always call if you have concerns, he said, but I don't expect any problems. They looked at each other in silence for a moment. Both of them knew this was probably goodbye, but neither wanted it to be. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" Sarah asked suddenly, surprising herself with her boldness. Dr. Harrison hesitated. He knew he should say no. She was his former patient, she was much younger than him, and she had a boyfriend. But the week since she left the hospital had been empty, and gray without her presence. "I know a quiet cafe near the hospital," he said, finally. They met the next afternoon at a small coffee shop that Dr. Harrison often visited between shifts. Sarah arrived first and chose a corner table where they could talk privately. When Dr. Harrison walked in, still wearing his white coat from the hospital, she felt her heart skip. "I wasn't sure you would come," she admitted as he sat down. "I almost didn't," he said honestly. "This is probably not a good idea." "Why?" Sarah asked, even though she knew the answer. "You know why," he said gently. "You're young, you have a boyfriend, and I was your doctor. There are many reasons why this is complicated." "But you came anyway," Sarah pointed out. "Yes," he admitted. "I came anyway." They talked for 2 hours about everything except the obvious attraction between them. Dr. Harrison told her about his travels and his work. Sarah shared her dreams and ambitions. They discovered they both loved old movies and classical music. The conversation flowed easily, as if they had known each other for years. When it was time to leave, they stood outside the cafe, neither wanting to say goodbye. "I should get back to the hospital," Dr. Harrison said reluctantly. "Of course," Sarah replied. "Thank you for the coffee." "Sarah," he said as she started to walk away. "I enjoyed this very much." "So did I," she said, turning back to face him. "Maybe we could do it again sometime?" Dr. Harrison knew he should say no, but instead he found himself nodding. "I'd like that." Over the next month, they met for coffee 3 more times. Each meeting felt like a secret adventure. They would talk about books and music, share stories about their lives, and carefully avoid discussing the growing feelings between them. Sarah found herself thinking about Dr. Harrison constantly. She would count the days until their next meeting and replay their conversations in her mind. She began to feel guilty about deceiving Jake, but she couldn't bring herself to stop seeing the doctor. Jake noticed that Sarah seemed happier and more energetic, and he assumed it was because she was fully recovering from the accident. He didn't suspect that she was meeting another man. During their 4th coffee meeting, Dr. Harrison seemed different. He was quieter than usual and kept checking his watch. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked. "I've been thinking," he said carefully. "Maybe we should stop meeting like this." Sarah felt her heart drop. "Why? Have I done something wrong?" "No," he said quickly. "You haven't done anything wrong. But I think we both know that our friendship is becoming something more, and that's not fair to you or your boyfriend." Sarah stared at her coffee cup, fighting back tears. "What if I don't care about being fair?" "But I do," Dr. Harrison said softly. "I care about you too much to let you make a mistake that could hurt you." "Who says it would be a mistake?" Sarah asked, looking up at him with tears in her eyes. Dr. Harrison reached across the table and touched her hand briefly. "You're 27 years old with your whole life ahead of you. I'm 45 and set in my ways. We're at completely different stages of life." "Age doesn't matter," Sarah protested. "It does matter," he said sadly, "and there are other complications you don't even know about." Sarah didn't understand what he meant by that, but she could see that his mind was made up. They finished their coffee in awkward silence, and when they parted outside the cafe, both of them felt like something precious was ending. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Dr. Harrison's words and the sad look in his eyes when he said goodbye. She wondered what complications he was referring to, and why he seemed so determined to push her away when she knew he cared about her. What she didn't know was that Dr. Harrison was lying awake in his own bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering if he was making the biggest mistake of his life by letting her go. 3 days later, Sarah received a text message that would change everything. It was from Dr. Harrison, and it said simply, "I can't stop thinking about you. Can we meet one more time?" Sarah's hands shook as she typed back, "Yes, when and where." They arranged to meet at a park near the river the next evening. Sarah told Jake she was going to see her friend Emma, hating herself for the lie, but unable to resist the chance to see Dr. Harrison again. As she walked toward their meeting place, Sarah had no idea that this would be the night when their secret relationship would finally cross the line from friendship into something much more dangerous and complicated. Sarah arrived at the park 15 minutes early, her heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. She had chosen a simple blue dress that Dr. Harrison had once complimented, and she had spent extra time on her makeup. The evening was warm and couples were walking along the river path enjoying the sunset. When Dr. Harrison appeared, walking slowly toward their meeting spot, Sarah felt her breath catch. He looked handsome but troubled, his hands deep in his pockets and his expression serious. "Thank you for coming," he said as he reached her. "I wasn't sure you would show up," Sarah admitted. "You seemed so determined to end things the other day." They started walking along the river path, maintaining a careful distance between them. For a while, neither spoke, both struggling with the weight of unspoken feelings. "I've been thinking about what you said." Sarah finally broke the silence. "About complications I don't know about." "What did you mean?" Dr. Harrison stopped walking and turned to face her. "Sarah, there are things about my life that make this situation even more impossible than you realize." "Tell me," she said simply. He ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling with how to explain. "My son, the one I mentioned to you in the hospital. His work in sales, the business trips." "What about him?" Sarah asked, though something cold was beginning to form in her stomach. "He's been with his girlfriend for about 2 years now," Dr. Harrison continued, his voice growing quieter. "A lovely young woman who works in marketing. He talks about her all the time, about how much he loves her." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "What's his name?" she whispered. Dr. Harrison looked at her with eyes full of pain and regret. Jake Harrison." The world seemed to stop spinning. Sarah staggered backward, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "No," she breathed. "That's impossible." "I realized who you were during your second week in the hospital," Dr. Harrison said miserably. "Jake had shown me pictures of you, talked about you constantly. But you were unconscious when you arrived, and by the time I recognized you, I was already—" "Already what?" Sarah demanded, her voice rising. "Already falling for you," he admitted. Sarah felt like she was going to be sick. The man she had been falling in love with, the man she had been meeting secretly and lying to Jake about, was Jake's father. The father Jake rarely saw because he was always working. The father Jake complained didn't understand him. The father Jake had been trying to introduce her to for months. "Oh God," she whispered, sinking onto a nearby bench. "Oh God, what have we done?" Dr. Harrison sat beside her, keeping a careful distance. "We haven't done anything wrong," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Haven't we?" Sarah looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "I've been lying to Jake for weeks. I've been thinking about you constantly. I've been falling in love with my boyfriend's father." "And I've been doing the same thing," Dr. Harrison said quietly. "I've been betraying my own son." They sat in stunned silence as the full weight of the situation hit them. Everything that had felt magical and right between them was suddenly twisted and wrong. The connection they had felt wasn't just inappropriate because of their age difference or their doctor-patient history. It was a betrayal of the most fundamental kind. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Sarah asked. "I tried to stay away," he said. "I tried to end things before they went too far. But every time I saw you, I forgot about everything else. I've never felt this way about anyone since my wife died." "But Jake is your son," Sarah said, as if saying it out loud would make the reality sink in. "I know," Dr. Harrison replied miserably. "Believe me, I know." Sarah stood up abruptly and began pacing. "He's been trying to arrange for us to meet for months," she said, laughing bitterly. "He wanted his father to meet his girlfriend. He said he was sure we would like each other." "He was right about that," Dr. Harrison said sadly. "This is insane," Sarah said, running her hands through her hair. "This whole situation is completely insane. How could this happen?" "I don't know," Dr. Harrison admitted. "Jake never mentioned your full name to me, just called you Sarah. And you never mentioned Jake's last name to me. It was like fate was playing a cruel joke on both of us." Sarah thought back to all their conversations, realizing how carefully they had both avoided certain details about their personal lives. She had never asked Dr. Harrison's first name, and he had never asked about Jake's last name or profession details. They had been so focused on getting to know each other that they had missed the obvious clues. "What are we going to do?" Sarah asked, though she already knew there was only one answer. "We have to end this," Dr. Harrison said firmly. "We have to forget about whatever feelings we have and never see each other again." "And Jake?" Sarah asked. "Jake can never know," Dr. Harrison said. "This would destroy him. He loves you and he trusts both of us." Sarah felt fresh tears starting. But I don't know if I can pretend nothing happened. How can I look at him the same way? How can I be with him knowing that I have feelings for his father? You have to, Dr. Harrison said, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as her. We both have to. A jogger ran past them and they both realized they were having this devastating conversation in a public place. The normalcy of the park around them made their situation feel even more surreal. I should go, Sarah said, wiping her eyes and trying to compose herself. Sarah, wait, Dr. Harrison called as she started to walk away. She turned back, hope flickering in her eyes despite everything. I need you to know, he said, his voice breaking slightly, that these past few weeks getting to know you, they've been the happiest I've been in years. Even though this is impossible, even though we can never be together, I don't regret meeting you. Sarah's heart broke a little more. I don't regret it either, she whispered. But that almost makes it worse. As she walked away from him, Sarah felt like she was leaving a piece of herself behind. The man who had saved her life had also broken her heart, and the worst part was that it wasn't really anyone's fault. It was just a cruel twist of fate that had brought them together, and now was tearing them apart. That night, Sarah sat in her apartment staring at the wall, trying to figure out how she was going to face Jake when he came home from work. How could she kiss him and tell him she loved him when her heart was breaking for someone else? How could she pretend that everything was normal when her entire world had just been turned upside down? When Jake walked through the door an hour later, cheerful and talking about his day, Sarah realized that her real nightmare was just beginning. The next few days were torture for Sarah. She tried to act normal around Jake, but everything felt forced and fake. When he kissed her, she thought about Dr. Harrison. When he talked about his work, she wondered if he would mention his father. When he suggested they watch a movie together, she found excuses to stay busy. Jake noticed the change immediately. You've been acting strange since your follow-up appointment, he said Thursday evening as they sat at dinner. Did the doctor say something that worried you? Sarah almost choked on her food. No, everything is fine with my recovery. Then what's wrong? Jake pressed. You barely talk to me anymore. You seem like you're somewhere else all the time. I'm just tired, Sarah lied. The physical therapy is exhausting, but Jake wasn't satisfied with that answer. He had been patient for weeks, thinking Sarah needed time to recover from the trauma of the accident. Now he was starting to feel like she was pushing him away deliberately. Maybe we should go away for the weekend, he suggested. Get out of the city, relax somewhere nice. We could go to that bed and breakfast in the mountains you mentioned once. Sarah felt trapped. The last thing she wanted was to spend a romantic weekend with Jake while her heart was breaking for his father. But she couldn't think of a good excuse to refuse without raising more suspicions. That sounds nice, she said weakly. That night, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling while Jake slept peacefully beside her. She kept thinking about Dr. Harrison, wondering if he was having as much trouble sleeping as she was. She imagined him in his empty house, struggling with the same guilt and heartbreak that was consuming her. Meanwhile, Dr. Harrison was indeed lying awake in his bed across town. He had thrown himself into work, taking extra shifts and volunteering for the most difficult cases. But no matter how busy he kept himself, he couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face in the park when she realized the truth. The pain in her eyes haunted him. On Friday morning, something happened that made everything worse. Jake called Dr. Harrison from work. Hey, Dad, Jake said, sounding excited. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I wanted to ask you something. Dr. Harrison's stomach clenched. What is it? Sarah and I are going away for the weekend, and when we get back, I want to finally arrange that dinner I've been talking about. You know, so you can meet her properly. I think you'll really like her. Dr. Harrison closed his eyes, feeling like he was being torn apart. Jake, I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Jake sounded confused. You've been saying you want to meet her for months. I've been very busy at the hospital lately, Dr. Harrison said, hating himself for lying to his son. Dad, you're always busy, Jake said with frustration. This is important to me. Sarah is important to me. I think I'm going to ask her to marry me soon. The words hit Dr. Harrison like a physical blow. Marry you? I've been thinking about it for a while, Jake continued, unaware of his father's distress. The accident made me realize how much she means to me. I don't want to waste any more time. Dr. Harrison had to sit down. The thought of Sarah marrying Jake, of her becoming his daughter-in-law, was unbearable. But what could he say? How could he tell his son not to marry the woman he loved without revealing the truth? That's wonderful, son, he managed to say. So you'll meet her? Maybe next weekend? Let me check my schedule, Dr. Harrison said, knowing he would find a way to avoid it. After he hung up, Dr. Harrison sat in his office with his head in his hands. The situation was becoming impossible. He couldn't avoid Jake forever, and he couldn't bear the thought of watching Sarah marry his son. That evening, Sarah was packing for the weekend trip when her phone rang. She saw Dr. Harrison's name on the caller ID and her heart started racing. "Hello?" she answered quietly, stepping into the bathroom and closing the door. "I'm sorry to call," Dr. Harrison said, his voice strained, "but I had to tell you something. Jake called me today." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "What did he say?" "He wants to arrange a dinner for us to meet," Dr. Harrison said. "And Sarah, he's thinking about proposing to you." Sarah sat down hard on the edge of the bathtub. "What?" "He said the accident made him realize how much you mean to him. He's ready to get married." Sarah felt like she was going to be sick. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't marry him. Not after everything that's happened." "You have to," Dr. Harrison said desperately. "If you don't, he'll want to know why. He'll ask questions we can't answer." "But I don't love him anymore," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, finally spoken out loud despite everything. "I love you too," Dr. Harrison whispered back. "But that's exactly why this is so impossible." "Sarah? Who are you talking to?" Jake's voice came from the bedroom. Sarah panicked. "I have to go," she whispered into the phone and hung up quickly. She wiped her eyes and opened the bathroom door. "Just confirming our dinner reservation for tomorrow night," she lied. Jake smiled and kissed her forehead. "Great, I can't wait for this weekend. We need some time alone together." That weekend at the mountain bed and breakfast was a nightmare for Sarah. Jake was romantic and attentive, taking her on hikes and planning special dinners. He talked about their future together, about the house they might buy and the children they might have. Every word felt like a knife in Sarah's heart. On Saturday night, as they sat by the fireplace in their room, Jake took her hands in his. "Sarah," he said, his eyes shining with love, "I have something important to ask you." Sarah's heart stopped. She knew what was coming, and she felt like she was drowning. "These past few months have made me realize how much I love you," Jake continued. "When I thought I might lose you in that accident, I knew I couldn't live without you." He got down on one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. "Will you marry me?" Sarah stared at the ring, paralyzed. She knew she should say yes, that it was the only way to keep their secret safe, but the words wouldn't come out of her mouth. "Sarah?" Jake said, starting to look worried. "Are you okay?" Sarah realized she was crying. I need some air," she said, standing up abruptly. "Sarah, wait," Jake called after her as she rushed out of the room. She ran outside into the cold mountain air, gasping for breath. How could she say yes to marrying Jake when she was in love with his father? How could she say no without destroying his life and revealing the truth? Jake followed her outside, still holding the ring box. "What's wrong?" he asked, looking confused and hurt. "I thought you would be happy." Sarah looked at the man she had been with for 2 years, the man who had stood by her through the accident and recovery, the man who deserved so much better than the lies she had been telling him. "Jake," she said slowly, "we need to talk." Sarah stood in the cold mountain air, shivering in her thin sweater, looking at Jake's confused and hopeful face. The ring box glittered in his hand, and she knew that whatever she said next would change all of their lives forever. "Jake, I can't marry you," she said quietly. "What?" Jake's face crumpled. "Why? I thought everything was going well between us." Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, trying to find the courage to continue. "It's not about us exactly. It's about me. I've changed since the accident." "Changed how?" Jake stepped closer, his voice desperate. "Whatever it is, we can work through it together." "No, we can't," Sarah said, fresh tears starting. "Jake, I don't love you the way you deserve to be loved anymore." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, still clutching the ring box. "I don't understand. You nearly died, and I realized how much I love you. Why would that make you love me less?" Sarah closed her eyes, knowing she couldn't tell him the whole truth, but needing to say enough to make him understand it was really over. "The accident changed my perspective on everything. What I want, who I am, what makes me happy. I'm not the same person you fell in love with. But people change together, Jake protested. That's what love is about. Growing and changing together. Not this kind of change, Sarah said sadly. Jake, you're a wonderful man. You deserve someone who loves you completely, without reservation. I can't be that person anymore. Jake stood there for a long moment staring at her. Is there someone else? He asked quietly. Sarah's heart nearly stopped. Why would you ask that? Because you've been different for weeks, distant like your heart was somewhere else. I kept telling myself it was because of the accident, but maybe I was wrong. Sarah wanted to lie, but she was tired of lying. Yes, she whispered. There is someone else. Jake's face went white. Who? Someone I can't be with, Sarah said quickly. Someone I should never have met. Jake, this isn't about you not being enough. You're amazing. This is about me making a terrible mistake. I want to know who it is, Jake said, his voice hard. It doesn't matter, Sarah replied. It's over. It has to be over. It matters to me, Jake shouted, his hurt turning to anger. I've been planning to propose for weeks. I bought this ring a month ago. I've been telling everyone how much I love you. And you've been sneaking around with someone else? Sarah flinched at his words. I never meant for any of this to happen. How long? Jake demanded. How long have you been seeing him? We're not seeing each other, Sarah said. We only met a few times. For coffee, nothing physical happened. But you fell in love with him, Jake said bitterly. Yes, Sarah admitted in a whisper. Jake threw the ring box across the parking lot, where it hit a tree and fell to the ground. I can't believe this. 2 years, Sarah. 2 years of my life. I know, Sarah said, crying harder now. I know, and I'm so sorry. They drove back to the city in complete silence. Jake's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, and Sarah stared out the window, knowing she had just destroyed the life of a good man who didn't deserve any of this. When they reached Sarah's apartment, Jake didn't get out of the car. I'll send someone to get my things, he said without looking at her. Jake, Sarah started. Don't, he said sharply. Just don't. Sarah went upstairs to her empty apartment and called in sick to work for the rest of the week. She couldn't face normal life when everything had fallen apart so completely. 3 days later, Dr. Harrison showed up at her door. He looked terrible, with dark circles under his eyes and stubble on his face. Jake called me, he said when she opened the door. He said you broke up with him. He said there was someone else. Sarah let him in and they sat on her couch with careful distance between them. I couldn't marry him, Sarah said simply. I couldn't pretend to love him when my heart belongs to someone else. Did you tell him about us? Dr. Harrison asked, fear in his voice. No, Sarah replied. I told him there was someone I couldn't be with. He doesn't know it's you. Dr. Harrison ran his hands through his hair. He's devastated. He came to my house yesterday crying. He wants to know who the other man is. He thinks if he can confront him, he can win you back. That's never going to happen, Sarah said quietly. I know, Dr. Harrison replied, but he doesn't understand why. And I can't explain it to him without destroying our relationship forever. They sat in silence for a while, both of them exhausted by the weight of their impossible situation. What happens now? Sarah asked eventually. I don't know, Dr. Harrison admitted. Jake is my son. He's the only family I have left. I can't lose him. And I can't be with someone knowing it would destroy the person I love, Sarah said. So where does that leave us? Dr. Harrison looked at her with eyes full of pain and love. I think it leaves us apart. Sarah nodded, even though the thought broke her heart. I know you're right. But knowing something and accepting it are two different things. I keep thinking about what you said in the park, Dr. Harrison said, about how this whole situation is insane. You were right. The odds of this happening, of us meeting this way and falling for each other without knowing who we were to each other, it's astronomical. Maybe that means something, Sarah suggested. Maybe we were meant to meet. Or maybe it means we were meant to learn that love isn't always enough, Dr. Harrison replied sadly. A week later, Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She quit her job and moved to Seattle, where her sister lived. She couldn't stay in the same city as both Jake and Dr. Harrison, seeing reminders of them everywhere and wondering if she might run into one of them. Before she left, she wrote Dr. Harrison a letter that she never sent. In it, she told him that loving him had been both the most wonderful and most painful experience of her life. She thanked him for saving her life, even though she wasn't sure anymore if that had been a blessing or a curse. Dr. Harrison never knew about the letter, but he felt Sarah's absence in the city like a physical ache. He threw himself into his work even more than before, and slowly began to rebuild his relationship with Jake, who remained heartbroken and confused for months. Jake never found out who the other man was, though he hired a private investigator to try to track him down. The investigator found nothing because there was nothing to find. Sarah and Dr. Harrison had been careful to meet only in public places, and they had never been photographed together or seen by anyone who knew them both. A year later, Jake started dating someone new, a nurse from his father's hospital. Dr. Harrison was careful to stay professional around her, determined never to let anything like the Sarah situation happen again. And Sarah, she started over in Seattle, eventually finding work at a new marketing firm and slowly beginning to heal. She dated occasionally, but no one ever made her feel the way Dr. Harrison had. Sometimes she wondered if she had thrown away her chance at happiness with Jake for a love that was doomed from the start. But on quiet nights when she looked out at the Seattle skyline, she remembered the way Dr. Harrison had looked at her in those stolen moments at the coffee shop, and she knew that despite everything, she didn't regret falling in love with him. Some loves were meant to transform you, even if they couldn't last. Years passed, and the sharp pain of their separation faded into a gentle ache that Sarah carried with her always. She never tried to contact Dr. Harrison, and he never tried to find her. They had loved each other enough to let each other go, and sometimes, that's the most profound kind of love of all. The story of the woman who fell for the doctor who saved her life would always be their secret, a beautiful and tragic chapter that changed all three of their lives forever.